Hello, my name is Gareth. You're watching the Hub Online Network. We have Councillor Wendy Coomber in the studio today, so let's get to it. So yeah, Wendy Coomber's here visiting us all the way from Cache Creek. Wendy has been a councillor for 6 years. And, well, no, you're in your second term.
16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 4.
Yes.
It was a by-election in 2016.
But we'll let Wendy talk for herself, and we'll see how. So, why did you get started in the world of politics?
I blame it on my parents. They dragged me to a city council meeting when I was a teenager, and although it bored the heck out of me, I guess I grew up in a rather political family. We were always talking about politics, and then I decided I wanted to go into journalism. When I was 13, we had something on the news called Watergate. Took up a lot of interest with my family. So doing that for just about 40 years, I sat in a lot of council meetings, and even a few provincial level meetings. And, you know, you sit there, and if you sit there long enough, you go, why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? Oh boy, I could do that better. Boy, what a bunch of boneheads. Now I'm in that chair. So when the opportunity arose, I retired in February 2016, and unfortunately, Councillor Herb Hofer passed away that spring. So there was an opportunity to run for by-election, so it's the opportunity I was waiting for, so I tossed my hat in.
Awesome.
I didn't realize I was going to have to run against Gareth Smart.
Well, I actually came in like way last, third place. There was three of us running.
It was close.
But I couldn't have lost to a better person. So let's go back to you being a journalist then. Did you have, so of all the things that journalists cover, did you have a keen interest in politics specifically, or was it just sort of a byproduct of the job for you?
It's pretty much a byproduct. When you're in a small newsroom, and they're all small these days, you just cover everything. So you go from the First Nations sit-in at the local college to school board to council to Mrs. Smith and her prize-winning dahlias. You get it all.
So did you run the newspaper here for 40 years?
14.
14, okay.
Yes.
But you've been a journalist for?
All over.
Awesome. So now that you've made the transition, and you were saying that as you sat in on council meetings that you felt like people, you know, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? Do you feel that now that you're on the other side, do you feel that you are doing the things that you thought the council should have been doing?
I'm doing the things that those councils were doing. They just look different from the other side of the bench.
Is there an example of that? So,
nothing specific that you can think of. It's just like, well, why is it taking so long? Why did they choose this and not that? And you know, when you're in that position, you realize that there are rules that you have to follow. There are levels that you have to go one at a time. Towns don't get to do everything that they want to do. Sometimes they have to follow rules that are put out by the province or by the federal government. Bureaucracy, legislation is something that it's hard for some people to deal with because it takes a while, but that's how we learn patience.
well, it's amazing that how you put it that way, because usually when I talk to people about councils or federal politics or anything like that, they always say, oh, why don't they just vote on it and do it, right? So a lot of people don't know about the time frames and the lengths that a lot of councils have to go through and the processes of just getting one piece of legislation to go through. Mm-hmm. So now you have sat on 2 councils. Let's see if you'll fall for the trap. Which council was better?
They both have their positives and their negatives.
Awesome. So when you got started, what were some of the things that what was your platform?
I think my platform was just to listen to people and try and do my best to relay their concerns and wishes to council.
Do you hear or get emails or people stopping you on the street about certain issues that they have with what's going on in Cache Creek? Like just in general?
Is this where I put in the plug for the Cache Creek Market?
Sure.
Well, we have the Cache Creek Market every Saturday, and since I'm the volunteer manager, I'm there every Saturday, and people know that I'm there, and they are always welcome to, and they take that opportunity to come and tell me what they're thinking and what they think council should be doing. And it's not just the market, it's the grocery store, it's everywhere you go, because you never stop being a council member. Once you're on council, you're not a member of the public anymore. You're always available. You're always sitting on that chair.
Of all the times that then you've heard people's issues, this is the only word that's coming to mind. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
How many of the things have you brought into council, do you think? Do you talk about people's concerns often, or just when something big is going on?
No, it usually comes up. If there's not an opportunity to bring it up at a council level, then I will mention it either to our chief administrative officer or to a fellow councillor that, hey, have you heard anything about this? What do you think of this? Have you got any ideas? Is there some way we can move on this?
Fair enough. So again, going back to the fact that you've been a councillor now on two different council groups, what was the transition like between your first set of people and now the second set of people?
It was a little rough because the last 6 months of the first council, we didn't have senior staff. We didn't have an administrator, and we didn't have a treasurer.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so it was kind of a little bit of a bumpy road to get through that, but I don't want to talk in depth about the administrator because we're related. But he was administrator before, which made it a little easier. It wasn't my decision to hire him.
Actually, so that's a half decent segue to talk about conflict of interest. Just so everybody is aware, and you are going to recuse yourself talking about the CAO, of course, because you are married to the CAO.
33 wonderful years.
Congratulations.
Well, maybe not 33 wonderful years. Maybe like 31 or 32.
No, they can't all be good, right? So that is why we're not going to talk about the CAO. Not that there's much to talk about. Martin's great, but Cache Creek, and we don't need to go into depth about this, but Cache Creek has, in recent time, been under a lot of conflict of interest talks. Mm-hmm. I think it's because, well, actually, why do you think that that's the case?
Well, Councillor Defoe's husband is on the fire department, so can be in a bit of a conflict if certain issues that come up there. Councillor Peters' daughter works in the office, so if there's union talk, she's in a bit of a conflict, and her daughter is also on the fire department, so there's conflict of interest there. And the mayor is also in a relationship with a member of the office staff, so he's in a conflict there, and she's also on the fire department, so there's a conflict there. In certain matters, not in everything.
Right. I think it sort of comes down to lots of hats. There's lots of people in the village office that wear lots of different hats, and in a small town, when you have a lot of people doing a lot of different things, mm-hmm. I think that you'd be hard pressed not to have a conflict of interest in a lot of cases.
Yeah, people who do a lot for the community tend to gravitate towards the village office. It's true. It's just, you know, my heart is with my community. I just love to be out there doing things for her, as I know Councillor Peters does. And, and so we build up a lot of relationships. And when you sit on council, sometimes it's not a problem, but you just have to be aware of where the boundaries are and the ones that you can't cross.
Right. So what are some of the things that you feel are an issue in Cache Creek at the moment? If there was a couple of things that you would, if you had all the money in the world that you would just fix, what would those things be?
Well, I keep telling people if I won $10 million on a lottery, I'd build a conference center. But commercial development, getting rid or fixing those unsightly lots and businesses along the highway. That's been, you know, something everybody who comes to town says, what is with that building? What are all those empty lots doing there? It was the same when I came 18 years ago, and it's, wow, I guess if I had the money, I'd buy them all up, but I don't. I'd like to find a way to fix our annual flooding and fires and everything else. We're actually working on that. I don't know if we're going to be able to find a fix, but we're certainly looking into it. You know, more commercial development, more residential development, get the pool back in shape. I'm hoping that we can get that open again next spring, provide more recreational opportunities.
Talking about flooding, you're part of the ESS or EOC?
Both, but this time it was the EOC.
So just because the interview's with you, we don't have to talk about council all the time. What was your role on the EOC, and what did you do?
Well, surprise, I was the communications officer. When you're in an emergency situation, people just, if they want to help, they just all come together, and nobody has a formal title. They all just do what their strengths are. So many years ago, when I lived in the Peace Country, I was living in Taylor at the time, and we had an emergency where the town had to evacuate in 2000. And I was a working journalist at that time, and so I volunteered my time to become the communications officer for that. Unfortunately, on that very day, I was in Dawson Creek, so I wasn't on the scene, but I did that afterwards for the aftermath and for a few years later. So when the flooding occurred this year, I just offered to help out for the communications, and the mayor actually asked me to take care of quite a few of the media who were trying to contact him because he, for whatever reasons of his own.
Right. So you must really enjoy being involved in the community.
Yeah, I don't really like talking on camera, but everything else is good.
Well, I really appreciate the fact that you're in here today, because I know that you don't like this. But what are some of the other groups that you are a part of?
For council or for myself?
Not just for yourself.
I'm part of the Cache Creek Beautification Society and have been since it was formed in 2003. Not on quite as many as I used to be right now, but and that includes the Cache Creek Market. We were doing Communities in Bloom up until recently. Our last year on that was 2018. We haven't done anything too much since. For the village, I sit on Hat Creek Ranch and the Interior Health Regional Health Table, Gold Country, BC Transit.
Wow.
The local health committee. And Councillor Peters and I recently asked council's permission to form an emergency preparedness committee for council. And we're working on trying to fix that flood problem. I do liaise with the Graffiti Day Committee because we do our swap meet every year at the market. Not this year because we had no graffiti days, but hopefully again next year.
And for those of you that don't know, Graffiti Days is like an old-time car show and parade in Cache Creek. And with lots of fun events, a dance, and all sorts of festivities over the course of
Smoke show.
a week. Oh yeah, the smoke show's awesome. I've never smelled so much rubber in my life.
Oh, jeez.
But we do have people like one of my bosses from Ontario watches all of our shows, so I just want to make sure that she is aware as to what we're talking. I'm trying to give her context. But
I know there's more out there, but I can't remember them at the moment.
well, that's fair. That's a lot. For the ones for council, do you get appointed or do you choose sort of volunteers? Like something comes up and you go, I'll do that one.
Sometimes you put your hand up, but most of them are appointed. The ones that I rattled off, except for the Select Committee on Emergency Preparedness, yeah, they were all appointments.
How much extra time outside of council meetings do you spend as a council person?
Well, it depends on if there's flooding or not.
Let's just say in a...
But I didn't do that as council, I did that as a volunteer. Probably maybe 4 or 5 hours a week.
Oh. With all the committees, that doesn't sound like a lot.
No, but I
So-
mean, the committees don't happen every week.
Right.
They're
Okay, that's fair.
usually once a month. You have meetings twice a month for council, so you have to go over all of your agenda things and make your notes and highlight all the areas that you don't want to forget about.
I will say that before someone explained it to me, I would go to to film the meetings, and there would always be no meeting, no report.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what are these guys doing? And for like 2 or 3 months, I was like, oh my God, another one with all these things. And then it was explained to me, and I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. They're not every month. It's only when they sort of happen. So anyway.
Well, we never used to do that under the former administration, but the current mayor likes the no committee, no report, so we've all gotten into the habit of saying that. So if we didn't say that, you wouldn't know that we didn't have anything to talk about under our committees.
That's really the contrast between you guys and Ashcroft. They have a different way of doing their council meetings. They don't do that. But it's interesting to see how 10 minutes down the road, things are just different. So what if, without going into specifics, because we already discussed that we're not going to go into specifics, but there have been lots of high tension council meetings recently. If that is how are you doing with that?
Personally, it's stressful, but we all have stress in our lives. So, I wish it could be better, but being a small town, there's a lot of history between some members of council and a lot of things maybe that keep coming to the foreground, even though they happened many, many, many years ago. And maybe I'm just totally reading it wrong, and it's all new relationships, and I don't know. Maybe I could put it down to inexperience around the council chambers, but that's sort of doing a disservice to people who are sitting there. I'm sure they know exactly what they're doing, and it is what it is.
Currently in the world, so in the province, as of today, the provincial government has called a snap election. And I see that you have a Jackie Taggart button on. Jackie Taggart is our local member of the Legislative Assembly.
And she is awesome.
And there is talks of a looming federal snap election, possibly. So let's just say that the municipality of Cache Creek followed suit and had a snap election. At this moment in time, would you run again? Like if 2 months from now there was an election, would you run again?
Yes.
Awesome. What is your so now we've talked about what you would want to do today. Do you have a 5-year goal for Cache Creek if you had one? What would you like to see happen? Again, if you had unlimited resources.
They're mostly general plans,
Sure.
not specific plans,
Sure.
because if you have a general plan, you can fill in the gaps. So, plan for the Cache Creek Park to have either the pool back up and running or a beautiful water park would be very nice. More electric vehicle infrastructure, more solar panels, more energy efficient things. Apparently BC Hydro is going to be installing LED streetlights either by the end of this year or sometime next year. That would be great, but maybe that will depend on the results of this election. Most of them seem like fantasy right now, so it's
Well, I'm open to fantasy.
We've been lobbying everybody that we can in the provincial government right now and finding out they're not running again. But we've been asking them for different aspects of what we think will help us with any future flooding. More gauges, more monitors, more bridges, less culverts, more green spaces to absorb the rain if we get heavy rains again. Yeah, just fill in those empty lots with wonderful, kind of funky, thriving businesses. Make it a place where people enjoy walking and strolling and singing and creating and just being in a beautiful place like Cache Creek.
So again, with fantasy in mind, let's just say in a perfect world, this is what would happen. You can put new businesses in those lots that you're talking about. What types of businesses would you personally like to have fill those spaces?
What we have, is great. We have a lot of restaurants. We have a few gas stations. We've got a lot of franchises. But what I would love to see are, what they call mom and pop, creative little places that you don't expect, like art shops or bookshops or funky little restaurants, vegetarian restaurants. Hey, how about that? Kind of an incubator where it just creates more. People get into a mindset where they realize that these things are possible, so they decide to create their own. Just builds on itself.
Right. Since about 7 months ago, COVID-19 swept through the world, and we're still living in a COVID-19 reality. What has been some interesting, if there has been anything, what were some interesting things that COVID made the council do?
Well, it made it really interesting during flood response. The province kept asking us, how are you maintaining COVID protocols? And it was like, we're trying our best. Well, it canceled a lot of events, unfortunately. It canceled a lot here too. The day that we were going to vote on reopening the pool at council, the COVID protocols were put in place, and it was like, myself and one other council member voted to keep it open, but everyone else sort of realized that it was not going to be something that we could do with COVID. The market has been progressing fine, but I'm not sure what the winter is going to look like, because outdoor activities are fine, but once the bad weather comes, everybody wants to move indoors, and that's going to be difficult.
And then last year you did it indoors at the community hall?
Are you talking market?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. But, all sorts of things happen indoors, especially over the cold months, and I'm thinking that we're going to see a real decline in that. The Christmas concerts, I've heard that the Christmas train is not coming. I don't know if that's true or not, because you have a big crowd of people come out to watch it. So, if the weather is good, we might continue to do outdoor events, but hard to say.
Now, since you're in the government, do you have any secret knowledge about when COVID's going to be done?
Tomorrow. We're all done. It's done. It's so old, but, you can't just stop because there's a pandemic. You can't just sit in the house and say, well, I guess we're in for it for this year, maybe next year. And yeah, you can be creative, but it's not so easy when you're in a small town and lacking the resources compared to, say, if you were in Vancouver and had all sorts of great up-to-date tech and people coming up with ideas left, right, and center. It can be a bit of a stretch when your money is not there and your tech is pretty poor.
So I have one of these about every show that I do. I had a question and I lost the question every time.
So what's your favorite color, Gareth?
I'll
ask questions.
My favorite color is purple. So moving forward, and then so we talked about your 5-year goal. We talked about your you know what? That's what it is. It's the pool. That's what it is. So you've mentioned the pool a couple of times. Now, we have also talked about the pool on the show. We've done a little video about the pool closing last year. So in a realistic sense, I know that everybody wants the pool to stay open, but the way that things are now, how much do you think it would cost to fix? I'm sure that you guys have looked at those numbers, versus how much it costs to open versus how much Cache Creek can actually afford to do. Because seemingly, Cache Creek is not doing so well financially. That's just what it looks like on the outside. I could be wrong on that.
You're right.
So in a realistic sense, keeping in mind that, of course, you want to open the pool, does 2021, if COVID's done, is that a realistic thing to have?
In 2017, we spent nearly $100,000 just to fix it. This last year, WCB asked for several upgrades that were going to cost about another $30,000-$40,000 that we weren't expecting. Every year it's an aging facility. I mean, let's face it, it's quite old. When you get a street that's old, it starts to require a lot of maintenance. And that's where the pool is at. Every year we need to put more money into it just to fix up things. The openings have been delayed over the last few years because something's not done right, something else needs to be done. I think last year it was full of leaves that needed to be cleaned out. I hope, this is where hope comes into it. I hope it can be. you know, it's like the community hall. It needs maintenance, needs regular maintenance. We'll have to look at it again come budget time and see what our priorities for spending are. And but I really sincerely hope that we can open it.
Because you've been on both councils, you might actually, I've always had this question, and I've never really had an appropriate person to ask this question to. So when previous council was in, they seemed to have a way to pay for it. Nobody ever thought that there was an issue. To the point where, you know, admission was free, et cetera. So what was, and then when new council came in, it seemingly that wasn't the case. As someone looked at the numbers and said, how were we doing this before? We can't afford it now. So what is that difference?
Cache Creek landfill.
Okay.
The village was receiving nearly $1 million a year in royalties up until it closed on December 31st, 2016.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of money for a small town, and that's a lot of money that we aren't receiving anymore. We have to rely now on residential and commercial taxation, which doesn't even come to half of what we were getting from the landfill every year.
Right. Okay.
So the landfill is hoping to be up and running. We were hoping it was going to be up and running 2017, and then the fires, and then 18, 19. They're still working on it. That's about all I can say. They're still working on it.
There's no.
It's very close to opening. They just, they're just rounding up customers.
Okay. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about specifically?
No. I don't think so. There's sure a lot left to do, as you pointed out. It's slow, but most of what we do on council is pretty mundane. It's just listening to people and bringing it to council and making policy and directing staff to try and carry that out. It's very difficult. We have, even though we're up to a full complement of staff now, it's still a very small office.
Okay. I'm going to take a step back. I want to keep this going for another minute. So, so one of the things that everybody always says when I ask them, what are some roadblocks that you've come across? Let's start with that. What were some, you wanted to do something when you started out as a councillor. What has been some challenges that you've come across to get those things accomplished?
Well, sometimes council votes against you.
Has that, I don't think I've seen that happen to you yet.
Oh yeah, it has. Yeah.
What is it? Do you have an example of that?
Well, the pool.
Oh, right. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. It was like, sorry, but we're voting against you. Okay. The dog park, just couldn't find a place for that. We thought we had in the park extension, but apparently you can't. A dog park is not a permitted use in agricultural land reserve.
Really?
Really?
Interesting.
Yep. So that was a provincial barrier. Yeah. You know, there could be, you know, a few commercial buildings in town that would be nice if they were gone, but they do have owners, and you can't just go in and say, whoosh, bring in the cleaners, get rid of it. So that's a roadblock, having to, you know, your wishes on one hand versus reality on the other.
So when you've had something that everybody is on board with, so from moment one, you have the idea, to everybody goes, that's a great idea, they all vote for it. But then it takes a long time to have that thing actually come to fruition. What are the challenges of having something go through in a positive way?
Well, Way back when, we voted to proceed with the Love Cache Creek NDIT program, and then COVID. And it's like talking to the lady who's responsible for it at NDIT, and she says, well, we're just going to put it on the back burner. Go ahead and, put some feelers out and see what you can do, but I think we're going to wait on that until this is over. So, back to your point, when's it going to be over?
So NDIT, Northern Development
Initiative Trust.
They are heavily involved in municipal things.
They're a main funder, because when the Liberal government sold off BC Rail, they took the money and they gave a whack of it to NDIT and also SDIT, which is the southern component, the areas where BC Rail used to serve. So it is actually your money and my money that came from the provincial government that NDIT holds and gives out to not just municipalities, but also First Nations, local governments, and regional districts, and local governments can also sponsor other groups to apply and receive funding.
Right.
Especially tourism.
Okay. And currently, just for my own information, you have a lot of, the one big thing that you have going on with NDIT right now is the possibility of this, the foundation.
Yes, the Community Foundation.
Can you just explain that in like Cliff Notes version? Just because, like, from where I'm sitting, it sounds like a nice thing, but it doesn't sound practical.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I'm just not having it explained to me properly.
So the NDIT, one of their programs is the Community Foundation. They are willing to provide a grant of up to $50,000 if the local government will match it. So the last government thankfully left us with a little bit of a cushion called the Landfill Legacy, which is going down quickly, but hopefully it won't disappear completely. So we decided to take $50,000 from that and put it against the NDIT money because it had to be matching, and have the BC Interior Community Foundation set up a community fund for Cache Creek. It will go on forever, unlike if we just had $50,000, it would eventually just go to nothing. The Community Foundation assures us of a 3.5% return each year. You can only spend that money. The rest of the money sits in the foundation and gathers interest along with all of the other endowments that they have. It's really a nice idea.
In theory, could you not take the $50,000 and put it into interest bank?
I don't believe you'd get 3.5% these days.
Fair enough. And
not even with municipal finance authority.
When you get the money back from that $50,000 or $100,000, I guess it would be.
Yes.
Which people, groups, etc., are you able to? Because you have to have a foundation to give the money out.
The Community Foundation in Kamloops is the foundation, the Interior Community Foundation.
And so, who could benefit from the seemingly at lowest $3,500 a year?
We haven't formalized that yet, but in past councils we've been talking about maybe we would use it to fund the annual bursary that we provide for Cache Creek grads. Maybe we could use it to say the Navy League wanted to use the community hall.
Right.
Instead of just absorbing that cost, we could say, go apply to the Cache Creek Fund for that money, and sure, go ahead.
So council would still get the money and you could still give it to that group for free?
Yeah.
Okay.
Being in a small town, we don't have a lot of formal groups. We have a lot of informal groups and even some individuals. I mean, if an individual came and had a really great idea to start something, an event or a group, they wouldn't have their hands tied by not being a formal society in that way. So,
is there do you have to spend that interest? Or can you, if there was nothing 1 year, could you let it accrue and you would eventually have $15,000 that you could give out to something?
You're probably right in that. I haven't looked into that part of it yet. They told us from the foundation representative said, the money's there, just use it. And honestly, I don't think we'd have trouble spending it every year on groups, but it'd be nice to see it grow. Something else that you can do with a community foundation is you can donate to it. At one of the conferences I was at last year, they were raising money every year at this conference. They raise money for a different youth group depending on which community they're in. So they do it by selling 50-50 tickets.
Oh, yeah.
So the money that they raised from the 50-50s didn't go to the group itself. It went to the Southern Interior Community Foundation. And they had set up a pot of money for that group. So it went to the group, but it went through the community foundation, and they issued tax receipts for that, which is another nice feature of having it in a community foundation.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's something I didn't know.
Yeah. So if some group in Cache Creek wanted to raise money for our community foundation, say they held a supper in non-COVID times and charged $20 a plate for spaghetti or something, and that money would go into the community foundation and
Awesome.
and raise money, raise interest along with all of the other money in there.
I'm going to change gears on you here.
Oh.
So I want to go back to
You're gonna make me fall off my chair.
the possibility of a snap election.
Uh-huh.
Now, again, you having several years of journalist background, in your humble opinion, at this moment, do you feel that this snap election will help, hinder, or leave things the way they are?
In the province?
For the NDP. So the NDPs have called the election. Everything I've read so far is people saying that this is an unnecessary election, that Horgan's trying to steal power. But I'm sure that you're up on this. If you already have a pin, I'm sure that you're up on this particular topic.
Have you seen how many cabinet ministers of his have announced in the last few days that they're not running again?
What does that mean? Like
Jumping ship?
Is that what it is? Or that you feel that they're jumping ship opposed to, like, they're taking this as an opportunity to get out now?
It's really interesting, isn't it? It's that's how that would be my first impression. My second would be, maybe the Premier has tapped them on the shoulder and said, I'm thinking of replacing you after this election with so-and-so. So it could be a way of getting out while the getting's, before they're replaced. Because, of course, the Liberal government went and also the Liberal MLAs went and reappointed a lot of the MLAs to different shadow cabinet positions.
Right.
So, everybody knew this was coming. It was just when. The reason I'm wearing a Jackie pin is because she's from Ashcroft, which is good, and she has been so good to our communities in the time that she has been an MLA. especially when, well, I especially realized this when I was working for the wildfire transition program through Community Futures. Her office was so helpful for so many people who didn't quite fit the mold. They kind of had one foot in the cracks. They were about to fall through, and they did so much to help these people, and it was great. That's how you want, a political representative to be. So I'm thinking that he realizes, Premier Horgan realizes, that he's probably not going to gain any more seats out here. He's trying to do what he can to make sure that his support is still in place on the island and in the Lower Mainland.
Interesting. Well, that's it for me. If there's nothing else for you, right on. Well, I really do appreciate you coming in. Again, I know you don't like getting in front of the camera. We'll try and...
I know I've blushed all the way through, haven't I?
we'll try and work through the council members again before we get back to you, but we will ask you to come in again probably in 7 months-ish, I would imagine, if you're amicable to that. But thank you, everyone, for watching. Oh, if you haven't seen it yet, we do have an interview with Jackie Taggart from last week.
Oh.
So check that out, and you guys check that out as well. There's lots of really good information. This is just before the snap election was announced, so go watch that video now. And again, thank you, Wendy, for coming in, and we will see you all next time.